What if one invisible enemy decided the fate of democracy itself? In the year 430 BC, Athens was the most dazzling city in the Greek world. It had philosophy, drama, naval power, and a radical new experiment called democracy. But in just a few summers, a mysterious disease would tear through the city, kill perhaps a quarter of its people, and help push Athens off the course it thought it controlled. We know this story not from myth, but from someone who was there. Thucydides was an Athenian general and historian. He caught the disease, survived it, and then did something extraordinary for his time. He wrote about the plague with almost clinical precision. His account is one of the earliest detailed descriptions of an epidemic anywhere in the world. To understand what happened, we have to start with a strategic decision that turned Athens into a trap. When war broke out with Sparta, the Athenians believed that their walls and their navy would keep them safe. The plan was simple: avoid fighting Sparta's superior land army. Bring everyone inside the city walls, and along the long walls down to the harbor, and ride out the war behind stone and ships. On paper, this looked brilliant. In reality, it crammed tens of thousands of people into a space never designed to hold them. Imagine farmers abandoning their fields, villagers pouring in from the countryside, makeshift shelters thrown up in every open space, wells working overtime, waste piling up faster than it could be carried away. Gods, livestock, and humans all sharing the same crowded environment. In an era with no understanding of germs, this was the perfect setting for a disease to explode. And then, something good. The first cases appeared near the port of Pericles. Within days, the sickness rushed through the cramped neighborhoods and into the heart of the city. Thucydides describes its onset in brutal detail. People were suddenly seized by intense fever. Their eyes turned red and inflamed. Their throats and tongues became raw and bloody, their breath foul and labored. A violent cough followed. Soon, the whole body was gripped by pain. Many developed a rash, a kind of blistering eruption over the skin. They could turn into ulcers. Inside the body, the disease raged. Victims suffered from extreme thirst, but no amount of water seemed to help. They tore off their clothes, desperate to cool their burning skin, and some, Thucydides writes, threw themselves into cisterns and public fountains, unable to bear the heat. There was vomiting. There was diarrhea. In some cases, the disease attacked the extremities so badly that fingers, toes, and even entire limbs could blacken and die. Those who did recover often emerged with long-term damage, blindness, memory loss, or disfigurement scars. The speed was terrifying. People who had been healthy a few days earlier were suddenly lying dead in the streets. No one knew how the disease spread. There was no concept of viruses or bacteria. Some thought it came from poisoned wells. Others blamed miasma, a corruption of the air. Many believed it was a punishment sent by the gods. Doctors were among the first to die. They went from patient to patient with no masks, no gloves, no disinfectant, and in treating others, they exposed themselves over and over again. Their traditional methods, bloodletting, herbal nix juice, careful dyeing, did nothing. In some cases, they probably made things worse. Funeral customs collapsed under the sheer volume of death. In normal times, Athenians prided themselves on elaborate rituals of burial and mourning. During the plague, those rituals became impossible. Bodies were stacked in mass graves. Families, desperate not to leave their dead unburied, will place them on already burning pyres that belonged to someone else. The respect that once surrounded death was replaced by panic and exhaustion. Religion, too, took a hit. People noticed that the devout and the impious died at similar rates. If prayer did not protect you, what did that say about the gods? Some turned to wild superstition. Others abandoned religion altogether and focused only on the pleasures of the present. Thucydides writes that many Athenians began to spend their inheritances quickly, acting as if the future no longer mattered. The plague did not just kill individuals, it killed trust. And in the midst of this, it began to reshape the war. The Athenian navy, the key to the city's strategy, depended on a large number of citizens and resident foreigners to row the triremes. As the plague cut through the crowded city, it also decimated the pool of manpower that kept those ships moving. Army units were weakened. Civic offices went unfilled. Decisions were made in an atmosphere of fear and anger. Then came, perhaps the most symbolic blow of all the death of Pericles. Pericles was not just a politician, he was the architect of Athenian power, the man who had overseen the building of the Parthenon, and the main strategist behind the wartime plan. He had persuaded Athenians to abandon their countryside and trust in their walls and their fleet. When the plague broke out, his enemies blamed him for the suffering that followed. Pericles himself fell ill, recovered briefly, and then, in a later wave of the disease, died. With him went a kind of steady hand at the helm. After his death, Athenian politics became more erratic, more prone to risky adventures and internal conflict. The city would fight on for many more years, but the confident, unified Athens of the early war never truly returned. So what exactly was this disease that changed so much? For centuries, scholars have argued about the cause of the Plague of Athens. Thucydides' account is rich in detail, but it was written in a world without modern medical terminology. That makes it both incredibly valuable and deeply frustrating. Some researchers argue that it was smallpox, the high fever, the spreading rash, the high mortality, and the existence of immunity in survivors all line up reasonably well. In some modern analyses, smallpox is the leading candidate. But there are problems. The rabies does not clearly describe the classic pockmark scars that smallpox often leaves on survivors' faces. He also does not mention the distinctive back pain that many smallpox patients report. Others have suggested epidemic typhus, a disease spread by body lice that thrives in crowded, unhygienic conditions. Still others have argued for typhoid fever, especially after one study claimed to find traces of the typhoid bacterium in the teeth of people buried in a mass grave from the right time period. The issue is that no single modern disease fits every detail. Typhus usually produces a different pattern of rash. Typhoid does not typically cause the kind of blistering skin lesions that Thucydides describes. Measles can produce a rash and high fever, but it struggles to explain the gangrene of extremities. Even with modern microbiology and ancient DNA techniques, the Plague of Athens remains officially undiagnosed. When epidemiologists and classists line up Thucydides' text against modern textbooks, they are left with a list of almost, but not quite. In a way, this uncertainty is part of the story. It reminds us that there are limits to what we can reconstruct about the past, even with powerful tools. History keeps some of its secrets. What is not secret is the scale of the impact. Modern estimates suggest that between 75,000 and 100,000 people died in Athens and its surroundings. That could be roughly a quarter, or perhaps even up to a third, of the pre-war population. Demographic recovery took more than a decade. Entire families vanished. Property passed rapidly from hand to hand, reshaping wealth and class structures. The psychological scars went even deeper. A city that had once seen itself as the confident leader of Greece found that a microscopic agent could humble it more quickly than any Spartan spear. And yet, amid this catastrophe, something remarkable happened. Thucydides did not just describe the horror. He also made observations that sound strikingly modern. He noticed that caregivers who had already survived the disease seemed less likely to become sick again. In other words, he was glimpsing the idea of acquired immunity. He recognized that crowding played a role in how the disease spread. He documented the social consequences of an epidemic, the breakdown of norms, the erosion of faith, the temptation to seek scapegoats or to surrender to fatalism. When we read his account today, after our own experience with COVID-19, those passages feel uncannily familiar. Overcrowded spaces, confusion about transmission, desperate attempts to interpret the disaster through religion, politics, and science, healthcare workers on the front lines, rumors and misinformation, the tension between individual freedom and collective safety. The Great Plague of Athens is not just a story about a dead city and a dead language. It is a case study in how human societies respond when an invisible threat disrupts everything else. It helped decide the outcome of a war. It toppled leaders. It forced a thriving democracy to confront its own fragility. And it gave us one of the earliest field reports on what it means to live and try to think clearly in the middle of a pandemic. We still do not know the exact name of the pathogen that killed so many Athenians. But we do know something just as important. We know that even in the face of fear and death, there were people who chose to observe, to record, and to understand. People who refused to accept simple stories or easy blame. People who, like Thucydides, believed that if we look honestly at our worst crises, future generations might be better prepared when not, the next one comes. The Plague of Athens is, in the end, not only about how a city died, but about how knowledge is born in the dark. And that is a legacy that still matters. Every time we hear the word outbreak, every time we read the word epidemic, and every time we ask the most human question of all, what is happening to us, and what can we learn from it?